Hello everybody, welcome to Art Appreciation. So Module 4, in case you didn't read the instructions, is broken down into 5 different parts. You only have to watch 3. You can choose which 3 you want to watch. If you do watch 4 or 5, the 4th and 5th one will get you 5 bonus points if you take notes on it and submit that with your notes on the 3 that you are required to watch. If you have any questions about that, just let me know. We don't have any lecture notes questions for Module 4, so don't worry about that. You're just going to take notes on the 3 videos that you watch. Some of them are longer than others, but you can kind of just watch what you're interested in. You get to pick what you want to know more about. You do still need to read. It is a lot of reading. That's why our lectures are less. You still need to read, at least skim over, even if you don't read in heavy detail about the other things, the other types of art that we're going to talk about, because you will need that information for your assignments for this module. So let's get into it. So our first work of art is the Work of Vase. It dates 3200 to 3000 BCE. So if you're not familiar with how either BC or AD, and then the more modern version is BCE and CE. So the original BC and AD versions are based on Christianity. Christianity is relatively new compared to other religions. So in the modern age, we use BC, which is before Common Era, BCE, before Common Era, and then CE, which is Common Era. So we're in Common Era today. All of the dates start at 0. So if you think about a number line in math, if you're at 0 and you go past 0 backwards, you're going to count -1, -2, -3, so on. So that's how BCE dates work. So that's why we start with a larger number and a smaller number for BCE instead of the smaller number and then the larger. We're counting backwards from 0. And then for Common Era, we count forwards from 0. So those would be what your positive numbers. So BCE is before Common Era. Really, 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 really old. We're in 2026. This is 3200 BCE that this was created. So this is over 5,000 years old. So, that being said, that's how sort of BC, CE dates work. We're going to look at some older stuff from now on. We're going to be looking at some ancient things. So it's important that you understand just how old this stuff is. So this is actually one of the earliest surviving works of relief sculpture. It was found in the temple complex of the Sumerian goddess Inanna, and it's in the ruins of the ancient city of Uruk. So Uruk is located in the modern Al-Muthanna Governorate in South Iraq. So we have tons of art in the Iraq, Afghanistan area. Very, very ancient art. And because it's still a war zone and we don't have great relations and things are not great in that area, it's kind of hard to get some of this stuff. Like archaeological digs can be dangerous for more than one reason. So this vase is an example of low relief or bas relief. So low relief means that the images are very shallow. They don't stick very far off the back surface. They're very thin. They don't stick off very far. So they can still be detailed, but it's not depth detail. They're often very flat. So for this sculpture, the images are displayed in bands around. These can also be called registers. So we have different things in relation to the goddess Inanna. So we have plant life and animals. We have people bringing offerings. in procession. Then we have people presenting offerings to the goddess at the top register. We see hierarchical scale. We've talked about hierarchical scale before. So the more important figures are larger than the smaller figures. So we have smaller figures, we have bigger our goddess here. So the wheat and grain at the very bottom is not as important as Inanna at the top. So low relief sculptures don't have to be depicted on a vase. In this case, it's a vase, but they can be on a flat surface. They can be on a curved surface. They can be carved into something. They can be molded up with clay. So low relief doesn't have to be just on a ceramic vase. It can come in many forms. But the main thing about low relief is that it doesn't stick very far off the picture plane surface. Next, we have the Victory Stele of Naram Sin. So this is another example of low relief. This one is made with stone, so it was carved using a subtractive process. So when we talk about subtractive process, that means that the sculptor is subtracting something away. They're carving something off. They're taking away from the main material in order to create an image. So the alternative of that is an additive process. So an additive process is putting something onto your base to build up a design. So in our previous one, this could have gone either way. It could be additive or subtractive because it's clay. Clay can be worked both ways. Usually you build something up, then you carve bits away. You may add something else onto it. You may carve other bits back. So this one probably used both additive and subtractive processes. This one cannot use an additive process. It can only use a subtractive process because it's stone. You can't put a piece of stone back on once it comes off. And even if you try, it's not going to be the same. It's still going to have that kind of binder in there. It's going to have a crack. It's going to have a mark. So we see steles all across the ancient world. Basically, it's a usually vertical, sort of sometimes pointed item, marker. They're usually taller than they are wide, and they have something depicted on them. They have something carved on them. They're often used for memorial to commemorate an event. In this case, this one's a victory stele. So it depicts the victory of the Akkadian king Naram Sin, leading his army to victory over the Lulubi, which was a nearby mountain people. So we also have hierarchical scale here. He's bigger than all of his soldiers. This is only a portion of the stele. I couldn't find an image that depicted the whole thing. I think I have a textbook somewhere that has one in it. I just couldn't find it to get it for this lecture. But you actually see his soldiers sort of trampling over the defeated soldiers. So it's a little bit graphic. I mean, we have somebody pulling an arrow out of their neck. Very, very graphic. We have mountains in the background. There are words on the mountain that tell us what's happening. So in Akkadian, in the language, it does say who this is and what happened here. We have 3 suns ahead. One of the suns is kind of worn off over time. So these suns are actually meant to represent gods. So it's meant to be sort of a blessing. He's saying that he defeated these people. He won this victory because the gods allowed him to. So it must have been God's will. That becomes the justification for many, many wars throughout history is God called me to war. I must go to war. He'll bless me in battle. That's not always the case, though. So, low relief, subtractive process. Next, we have the Minkari triad. So, this is an example of high relief. So, with high relief sculptures, your items, your objects, your figures come very far off of the background. They're not all the way. they still are attached to the background. Sometimes there's carving behind figures. It makes them feel like they're coming further off. But they are still attached. So this is a statuary group showing 3 figures. It shows the Minkari with the white crown of Upper Egypt between the goddess Hathor and the personification of one of the provinces called Nemoi. There are multiple of these, and these sculptures were found intact by the archaeologist George Reisner in the Valley Temple of Minkari's Pyramid in the year 1908. They are believed to have once been painted with bright colors, and we do have hieroglyphs carved on the base telling us who the sculpture depicts. So what's it about? So these hieroglyphs here tell us what we are seeing, who we're seeing. This is made out of stone. It's a stone called schist. So again, it would have been a subtractive process. With stone, it's always subtractive. You can't add. So subtractive process. It's stone, and this is high relief. It's coming off. We have things that are almost completely detached. They're not all the way detached. They're still connected a little bit. So you can see like between the arms and body are still connected. With the legs, even the legs that are coming forward, there's still connection all the way back to that background. Another example of high relief is the Ludovisi battle sarcophagus. So this one comes from 250 to 260 AD, so it's a little bit newer. We have just a plethora of figures here. So this sarcophagus, when I say sarcophagus, I feel like I need to clarify. This is not something that would have held a body. I know that's our current sort of connotation with sarcophagus. Sarcophagus is basically just a box. It's a box that held something. It didn't have to be a dead anything. So this is just a very pretty box. It's I think it's pretty large. But anyway, it was found in 1620 in the Vigna Bernusconi tomb near the Porta Tiburtina. I know, that's a lot. It's from Rome. It is named for its first modern owner, who was Ludovico Ludovisi. And it's carved in the classical Hellenistic style, which we'll talk more about later. As the title suggests, this scene depicts a battle between the Romans and the Goths. So we say battle, sarcophagus. So it depicts a battle. The Romans are always going to be depicted wearing togas or skirts of some sort. The Goths are shown with their pants. That's how you can tell them apart, and I think that's really funny. The Goths wore pants because they were from the north. If you're not familiar with that, the Goths would have been sort of the English, French area, German area. The Romans, obviously, in Italy. So more southern. So it was a warmer climate. The Goths, it was a colder climate. They wore pants for warmth. The Romans thought it was very unmanly to wear pants, which I just think is so funny because it's so opposite of how it is today. So the Goths at this period of time were sort of descending into Rome. Rome had invaded the north multiple times, but the Goths were sort of fighting back at this point. This was kind of a period of time where people thought if you held the city of Rome, that you held the empire, which was not the case. The city of Rome was sacked multiple times by multiple people, all of whom at different points were underneath the Roman rule. So eventually this leads to the capital of Rome being moved to Constantinople, which we'll talk more about later. So in this one, the Romans win. The Romans are larger. They're all standing on top of the Goths. We see the Goths below. They're being covered up. This one's being trampled by a horse. So it's depicting that the Romans won. So again, this is high relief. We have things that are completely detached. So this horse's leg is completely not attached to the background. We have arms sticking out. We have deep shadows behind things. So high relief. It's still attached to the background. It's just sticking out a lot. Next, we're going to talk about the Townley Discobolus. This one says after Myron because this was once a Greek sculpture. The Greek sculptures were usually made in bronze, not always, but often. So when the Romans came in and took over Greece, they used the bronze for weapons. So they would make a copy in stone of a Greek bronze statue, then melt the bronze statue down to use for weapons. So we say after Myron because Myron would have designed this originally in bronze, but that copy doesn't exist anymore, at least not that we have. Usually the bronze sculptures wouldn't have had an armature. This one has an armature here. So the armature is just a piece that keeps the marble from collapsing or the stone from collapsing in on itself. Bronze didn't need it. Bronze was lighter weight and also a little bit more durable. So it's not going to break as easy, but it's going to be able to be strong enough to hold itself up. So this is an example of a sculpture in the round. So what we mean by sculpture in the round is it is not attached. It is attached to a base, but it's not attached to a back of something. You can walk all the way around this sculpture and see it from every angle. It is carved at every angle. It's called the Townley Discobolus because of who the British Museum purchased it from. It was purchased from Edward Townley. Discobolus means discus thrower, so he's in the act of throwing the disc. So we do see idealism here. So we see idealism in the human form. In the classical Greek style, we have a very stoic face. We don't have a lot of emotion at all. We do see that sort of contrapposto, one flexed, one bent of everything. And then we also have the S curve, even though it's in the act of doing something else. Another example of sculpture in the round is the Riese bronzes. These are actually in bronze still. These are original Greek statues. So you see there's no armature. They can hold up on their own because they're lighter weight, but still sturdy. They are hollow. Most bronze sculptures are. It's kind of a waste of material to have them be solid when you don't have to have them be solid. These still exist because they were found in the sea in 1972 near Riese, Calabria in southern Italy. So there are very, very few surviving bronze statues, and these are some of the only two that are this large. The only reason they survived is because they were part of a shipwreck. So the shipwrecked, they had the sculptures on board. They didn't recover them. So we get to recover them today. So these both were made using the lost wax casting technique. So with this technique, the sculpture was first formed using an additive process in clay. It may have had some subtractive process as well. We get the form created in clay. Then a layer of wax is put over the top and sculpted to get those fine details. So again, we sculpt the wax. Could have been additive and or subtractive. So then we add pins. So this kind of holds everything together. and we put clay around the outside of all of that. So the clay becomes our mold. We bake it, the wax melts out. Then we pour metal in, break all of the clay away, and we get our final form. The pins are usually metal, so they don't bake out. So we do have to sort of cut those off and sort of smooth those out. But that's how we get it in the metal form. So that's how they're hollow as well, is they're filled with clay. So only where the wax was is where our figure will be, where our metal will be. It's part of the reason that metal sculptures were lighter weight, is because they used that lost wax casting technique. Again, they're hollow, the metal's lighter than stone, and it's more durable. Sculptures can be made using a variety of materials. We've only looked at a few different materials in this lecture, mostly stone, but we do see some bronze. But anything can be assembled, carved, or built up can be made into a sculpture. So we talked a bit before about Lonnie Holly. This is Finally Getting Wings for the 41st Floor. This is an assemblage, which is another type of sculpture. Assemblages are more modern. They didn't make these in the ancient time, at least not that we know of and we have evidence of. The reason for that being, we waste materials more now. They didn't have materials to waste, so we have things like trash. Not to say that they didn't have trash, but not in the same way that we do. We have an excess. We have wire that we don't use. We have scraps of fabric and scraps of metal that just aren't being used, that we don't have a purpose for anymore. So those sort of things can be put together in an assemblage and sculpted, whereas they weren't really used that way before. Things would be melted down and turned into something else, not just left as trash. So again, this is more modern. This is an additive process. Things are put together to be built up. So again, anything can be carved. You can carve plastic, you can carve linoleum, you can carve stone, wood, metal even. That would be subtractive. Anything you build up, so clay, assemblage, if you build something with Play-Doh with your kids, foam, anything like that would be an additive sculptural process. So that's it for sculpture. And don't forget, if you haven't already, go back and watch 2 more videos.